Hello everyone. Today I would like to talk about an interesting concept that when we look around at things, or when we are having a joyful moment or a blissful moment, or just when we suddenly get a happy moment, it seems that when you look at people, their happiness is being based referentially. So like at some point they were not happy, now suddenly conditions, circumstances have changed and they're happy. It's as if like before you have one real relationship with your present moment, which is your problem, which is your condition, and then eventually as you progress through this life and handle life, you begin to see suddenly you are in the presence or in the resonance of the answer. Suddenly you see your newest moment is fine. Your newest moment is where the solution is. Because you are driving this vehicle of awareness. You are the pilot of consciousness, navigating your plane of existence. So we want to now take this idea, and Mr. Within wants to explore it in the way that instead of you discovering a new moment by first having a reference, let us in an instant just from the new moment see what we can see. Because if you are keeping something or trying to figure out something, you are working with a segmentation of space and time which is trying to suggest a certainty to you, which the transcendental certainty is not only in linearity. There are non-linear aspects to our presence and our knowing. Our knowingness is not only linear. Sometimes you get inspired by things you would have no idea. You know? Life has mystery in it. There's unknown aspects, and so if we are too certain, if we are too arrogant, if we are too identified, we will begin to naturally see that this identification will pass. So if one suddenly, let us say, takes their attention to the present moment, they will see the present moment is where time and space are being more considered. The more you think about time and space, the more you see you're right now existent as an awareness, as a self-awareness, and now the thoughts are coming. But a car could pass you by and immediately all the thoughts have gone because you're looking at the car or bus. So it's very important to see where man is heading with his vision in life. And so a novel moment gives you the access to, instead of comparing or getting a new sense, instead of suddenly changing into a new you or becoming a new version or a more realized version of you, as it is suggested in enlightenment and nirvana, you are, in a sense, leaving all comparisons which are making you a disciple and basking in your most directest experience, which is what the guru has been self-reflectively trying to spark in you. And this knowing has many layers in the sense that depth is not put there by us. We are deep. The ocean is deep, and our perception makes it deep for us or gives it depth. You see, there's a way where you are existing right now somewhere in some room or places you're hearing this talk, or some position, existential position, and as you are in this existential position, you are aware of that which you are considering and which you can recognize. But if you look at your approach to what is certain or what is true for you, is it encompassing your whole moment? What that means is like a body, for example, me saying, oh, I'm just this body, is an aspect of me considering a part of my moment. Some parts of my moment I cannot consider individually or within the bounds of duality, where language seems to define things. You begin to see it cannot be done when there never was a you in the first place, when there was the universe. I can think that I was the person from the first day of my life constantly getting better, advancing and going to that heavenly place, you know, or I can acknowledge the moment in such a way where heaven is a choice in self-awareness, where it's a state of consciousness being recognized consciously. You will find great value in your sense of novelty. It's that sense of new. And let me tell you, something that I found very simultaneously and very humorously present is that right when you don't know, when you are fully aware and consciously you say, I don't know, you begin to see that you have just obtained the capacity to know. You can begin to see life's patterns were never ones that the individual could work with, but the collective was expressing the individual through. So think of your sense of how you are identifying with yourself, rather than being somebody you were and now going to be somebody else, just realizing that you are a new experience. Where can conception lead in this moment of awareness? And this is where multidimensionality has the existential allowance to be found within your perception. If you choose not to drive to places you have never driven before, you'll constantly be in the same place, in the same places. Your routine is there for you to transcend it. That is why you're constantly working for that better improvement in whatever job you're doing or work you're doing. But you must realize that the improvement is a holistic one. It is one recognized by an ambition that could never be touched by man, but was always its man's untouchable experience. And I hope this clarifies that individuality and our sense of and your sense of being collective is all an existential dance that is existence as it is. When I went looking for the meaning of life, I rather than finding a meaning to a life that I was seeing, I began being more observant to the nature and the essence of how life is expressive through me. And when I realized that, I realized I don't really need anyone else's interpretation. I don't really need any lessons or structures built by human beings before. I need the authenticity and clarity to self-explore and self-discover where my experience is leading in this life and how much I want to receive for my moment. Sometimes you see that if you want something also from your moment, if you want to be like, oh, I got to be in the moment, oh, I got to be here and now, or I got to do this and do this, you will begin to see that that is setting you up for a salvation that you think is what your idea needs. To be honest, it's all about an awareness beyond ideology to the degree that you are your existential knowing. And so that is why I'm saying follow your intuition. It is not that much of a different state. It is a state of consciousness that is just a bit more existentially subtle. So what that means, if you acknowledge your harshness and suffering as not something so hard and rough and bad and that no, it should happen to no one, rather you begin to see that life happens as it does. And it is our acceptance of it that will begin giving us that new, novel sense of being to begin working anew. Because the way I had interpreted myself in my life for a long time was very insignificant, very incomplete, and conditioned and trapped by a sense of politeness where I didn't want to be rude, so I didn't ask questions. Politeness is fine when you are aware that there's no need for a polite person or a rude person, that you are existentially present and that the spectrums harmonize themselves with your awareness to them. What that means at that moment where you think you're so guilty, you're wrong, immediately think of how you can be free. And you will see that it is your allowance of perception and conception that is suggesting the experience you're having in the moment. Meditation is, I don't want to say a necessity, but I want to say it is required for those beings who are having experiences that are moving beyond linear frameworks. Man has not spent time to make a lot of non-linear frameworks, but that's really what you begin to see being the ancient books, the ancient wisdom books that are left. Think of it this way, regardless of what is true or not true, regardless of what is right or wrong, you are an experience here, and you need to think of the quality of your experience, and not in a selfish way, but in a selfless way. You want to begin seeing how the same water that is keeping the vegetation alive on this planet is also within you. And so there is a similarity in our elementary particles, it seems, and the mystics would call these the elements, the 5 elements, I believe. And you would begin to see these elementary particles changing because you are taking it to an experience in your subtler planes, and that's where deep thought really happens. Deep thought is not an experience immediately relevant to the physical, but the physical is constantly aware of it and inspired by it, and sometimes giving it shape. So what that means is one part of you has found the pencil at the notebook, but guess what? You're not just one writer. You're a multidimensional writer writing in many areas, and so your ability to read and see what you're writing really comes from how presence is being received by you again. This presence idea is very huge, because presence, I thought, oh my God, look at Martin Luther King, look at Gandhi, look at all these people, they have such a presence, you know? And it was more of an external thing where some external guy did something externally and, you know, he got it. But it never occurred to me that ability originates from within. And so when I realized this eventually, I began to see that the greatest abilities do not come from someone learning something and doing it. You know, even though it does, but it does not just come from you following someone. It comes from a self-leadership where you are originating into a new reality where, based on what is internally real for you, externality is comfortably perceived. So the process is that before we can even again approach the concept of truth and God and greater beings on this plane, we must acknowledge the nature of the apparatus of man, because it seems that the nature of the apparatus is suggesting that we exist in a collective intelligence that does not need to think it is lost to its individuality. When this comes into view, conscious view, your unconscious begins to shake you. It's as if you have brought a new form, a new lens to the same projector, you know, and so it's as if it does not matter anymore what experience of form you're having. It's more important of how much you're aware of the experiencer. And this is very crucial. This is where you need to develop the existential comfort. And hopefully you will see the flows of life will give this to you. You will suddenly see that you have intuitively trusted madness, and you have ended up somewhere where your heart feels like it's the right place, but your mind's like, what the hell am I doing here? Where's my backup? Right? So that happens, and that's something where you need to begin to see how much you respect the lifestyle you have chosen. Every person at this point does not need to have depression and stress, because that is a weak acknowledgement of the human idea and human experience. What is this concept of depression and stress? Of course, you create it for yourself by you creating deadlines, no? By you having that and you not realizing that you must handle. You take a shower. No, nobody comes and takes a shower for you. Nobody comes in, helps you with the shower. So what I'm pretty much saying is you need to take an existential responsibility. And if you don't have the ability to see this, it is the duty of the pilots of consciousness to shake this plane out of turbulence. Shake this plane of reality, this plane of a projection of a world. Because it is very clear to me, and in ancient wisdom traditions it has been even said also, Mr.Within will say, we are multidimensional beings, and our essence suggests self-reflectively that we are the originator of our experience. So if we are the originator of our experience beyond space and time, where do you think you are, my friend? And you begin to see that eternity never meant that you'd get the perfect story that could be approved by Walt Disney. I really like Charles Bukowski's attitude to certain views of life, because he culturally could see that there was some bullshit going on in reality. And in, I guess, what was then lower class American realism, you know, something like that. But what I noticed from Charles Bukowski was that he was a man who was aware of the subtlety of thought, was not aware of the subtlety of life force. So what that means is because he perhaps wanted to be a writer in this existence, he did not need eternal silence to inspire him, even though that may have very much so done, inspired him. But it's You see what I mean? There's a difference between writers who are writing and then going to the pub, and there's a difference between writers who are walking into unknown forests just to realize where the nature of man leads. There's a difference. However, in his understanding, Charles Bukowski did enlighten us of cultural inefficiency and social behaviors that are inadequate. You know, you need to be aware of the self, and the self is your experience. So what I'm pretty much telling you is that we're using words, I'm calling it self, but pretty much I am trying to catalyze you into instantly being aware where consciousness is. Where is your existence? And that profundity shall lead you to your greatest activation. An activation of expression selflessly done. And this selflessness again comes through that awareness to the present moment that needs no previous reference. So at times what the spiritual seeker realizes in the path to greater realization is that as he observes the incompleteness that is constantly longing to be complete, he begins to see that it was a choice in vision and never a choice in what externality was projected to be. What that means is existential responsibility does not mean you start taking care of everything in existence per se, in regards to just like tidying things up. It means that you allow yourself to be the clearest and most aware moment of existence. So you're working with the intelligence of the moment, and in that you are gaining the ability to have many senses of self. You see, we are only acknowledging the objective aspects, but it seems that this objectivity is held within flows of very hard to explain, but an unspeakable, dynamic, simultaneous expression. So what that means is that moment where we are the stillness, there is a greatness and being that is the movement. That moment where we are the movement, there's a greatness and being that is the stillness. And the nature of how we have entered this planet, or this world, is one where we must not make it only one world, but we must make us realize that because we don't know our face, our world also has no face unless a face is considered. So what that means is, if I'm saying I'm a human being, guess what? The human being's on earth. But if you are looking at the experiencer, which is unspeakable and unexplainable, then I am the might of my own sense of transcendent expression. What that means is you are touched by frameworks because they're trying to put you on the wall. And when you're put on the wall, guess what? You begin to see walls. You begin to see blocks. Barriers. Barriers that are just there because you're unaware of where you are. When I was looking at mindfulness, there was a very interesting point there. That mindfulness was not just only shutting the door more gently rather than slamming it in, but it was that extra awareness to your moment that was already there. It was something I don't want to say you have, because you move beyond your ideology and the concept of havingness shifts for you, but you know. Because knowing becomes the only pillar, because it is one of the very few words that man has that is suggesting its connection to an unknown flow. How did he know that? How could he know this? How could this happen? Do you see, it is the shift in knowing that is even suggesting a greater intelligence. Because how else would we know that we are beyond this form? How else would I have these concepts unless mankind has not thought about them? I have been in this world for close to 24 years. And before me, all these structures of language and systems have developed by the life force that has already been here. So I am an addition of a conscious view of an existential point to this grand canvas which is already connected and designed. So it is my arrogance to think I am disconnected in a world of connection. And so paradoxes are simply the passage. You must understand that it's not that you must constantly be in a state where you are not working because you're working somewhere else. Do you see that? You are working presently, and this presence is the work. One of the first quotes that came to me was that your work works with you. And what that means is that as you begin to go into greater states of awareness and consciousness and being in recognizing your life expression, your life process is not a process constantly based on moving from one location to another location to another space and time to another space and time to another space and time. Eventually, after going around the track, you begin to realize the whole track can be observed from a plane. And so perhaps the pilot of consciousness begins to see why there never needs to be a flight when you're the sky. Seems to be always there. These talks really focus on self-exploration and studying the nature of man. Mr.Within believes that it is now time for humanity to explore its multidimensionality. And guess what? If we are not certain that we are spiritual beings, if we're not certain that we're objective beings, it is time to do the greatest research process ever. So what that means is the human species gets coursework, gets homework, and gets this assignment to begin realizing what the apparatus is and where these multidimensionality is going on. What that means is we need to give ourselves the allowance to explore our infinite possibilities. Because if we don't know, then we're choosing the finite possibilities just because it's there, because we haven't seen the other ones. So the eyes of man are not just his physical eyes, they are his vision, which is rooted in his transcendental knowing, in which knowledge makes it a self-reflection and self-remembrance for you to see that existence existed always comfortably. That it was us who thought that stress and depression made us the victim. To be honest, the victim is the one who's being talked about or is being projected into a sense where you can touch it. How can you touch your image? How can you think that this reality is something that only is in this way? When deep questions come, it is your responsibility to explore your own depth. Because the depth is coming from you. When you begin to see, perhaps through my talk, some profound aspect of what I'm saying, what happens there is you looking at the life around you to see how you are within everything, because you are the self in which all others are being considered. These are very simple statements I'm saying, but because they suggest very deep-rooted context, it's as if your conditioning were weeds on the ground, I am just pulling out these weeds, and we're like, what the hell, you could have pulled out that weed, you know? So it's just like that kind of awareness to what is happening, because it is not about some profound guru pressing his thumb on your forehead and you having, like, you know, you being blown out of your mind. It's about you recognizing that ability is simply what brings human efficiency. So if I look around and the human beings around me are incapable, are not able, they're not seeing their ability, they're not having vision, well, that is ridiculous when we can have the vision to have the greatest species and the greatest civilization known to the cosmos. We are a new start. We are a new start. Nothing has happened. Nothing has happened so far. All that we have done is made plastic bags. And nuclear bombs. So it's very important to see that regardless of what man thinks he is existing and flowing in a state of collective existential acknowledgement simultaneously all the time. As you find Mr. Within, you had always found it. It is that knowing beyond space and time, as if like we are born here and suddenly we're conditioned and, oh wow, this is my name, this is my face, this is my shape, this is what I do, this is what I want, this is what I need, what this one, blah, 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 blah. It keeps going, right? Until you press pause and you're like, what idea is being allowed to suddenly be so changed in my mind? And where is the nature of change coming from? When we explore verbs, nouns cease to exist. When we explore the nature of action, the nature of movement, we begin to see that we were never running anywhere else aside from where we are. You're never running away from anything. You're always running to where everything can be received in your experience. And this is why some men suggest that you might want to get out of a vicinity of a problem, you might want to leave the problem, but if you don't confront it before you leave, or if you don't confront it and handle it, you will begin to see that that problem will stick with you in your next relationship, for example. Do you know? In your next experience, because you are carrying it with you. You are carrying that ideology. For example, you having a suggestion on you being stressed or depressed or you being ugly or beautiful is all a consideration of your presence in one moment of your reality. The next moment you go to a coffee shop, you're with your friends and you're all jolly and there's nothing wrong. So it is very important that you realize that man is successful and this success is innately within him. This ambition to be the greatest thing you can be, to transcend, is within you. The last time I checked, the ape was evolving. Guess what? The human is too, and it's moving towards dimensions of self-awareness where he needs to acknowledge multidimensionality to begin to see that his greater sense of being, his higher self, was never an individual self, but the awareness to all selves. Once the self of selves is found, you were never here, because here never had to be anything but the awareness to what it was. It was just an existential expression, and so the knowing of man was always beyond the knowing of man. And this is what the Upanishads, I find, playfully suggest, that they were never written by a man and they were never written for man. It was written by this timeless and spaceless intelligence, which there was just an intermediary. So the rishis were quite great maneuvers, pilots at that point, I believe. The rishis were great pilots. And so as they brought these Upanishads out, they in their collective state knew before that man needed revision. Can you understand this? The Upanishads were written before. Think about all those people, regardless of how much there's scientific accuracy or not, are depending their faith and their experience on the ideology of religion, which is just as equivalent as to any ideology. Any idea in science is equivalent to any idea in religion, because ideas are not the actual thing. That is why you find that by reading a book, you're not getting the experience of, like, say, that surfer who wrote a tip on how to surf. Wrote a book on how to surf. You begin to see that I can talk about the greatest meal ever, but if you're not eating it, it's not helpful, it's not efficient, it's not workable. So I can talk about greater states of consciousness, but if you do not self-activate, if you do not observe yourself, you cannot initiate these greater senses of vision within you, these greater senses of your own personality taking more responsibility. What that means is, I thought personality was something that didn't change. I thought for some reason, I thought it's just what you are, and you just, like, this is your personhood, right? But then I realized personality is all based on how much you're taking experiential responsibility for what you move in this life. What that means is, when I walk to the park, that is me taking an existential responsibility to move my legs, move my system, and take it into another area where I'm having a different experience. So similarly, we as people will begin to see that we need to put an effort to experience ourselves in our own profundity. And this effort begins from an individual trying to look in the mirror of existence, then shifts into the collective intuition that knows how the search must go. It is very simple for you to find the flows of life because they're always flowing. It is only the drop's illusion that it thinks it's a drop when it's in the river, when it's in the stream and it has a direction. And even though many people are thinking of an apocalypse, an end, a death, the waterfall is never the end, but it is a change. It is a 90-degree change in your experience, in your flow. It's as if you were going horizontally, suddenly you go into your states of being. That moment of death could perhaps be very playfully your transition into how many simultaneous states of being you are, and where your preference comes based on what you're paying attention to. So it is your awareness to the gross and subtler aspects of your experience that give you an understanding beyond the spectrum, because you can confront it. Sometimes you will notice something Mr. Within has noticed very curiously about fear, is that when you observe fear, it seems to be that thing where it's at the end of something, at the end of our spectrum where we don't want to confront. For example, the fear of death, it's at the end of life. Do you see? So it is our reaction to endings and beginnings and our interpretation of it that is making us fear a natural life transition. I don't see that leaf screaming when it's crumbling. Do you know? It's a natural phenomena, and of course this is not easy to talk about. This will never be easy to talk about, because I'm talking about the transition of life, and we are all very unique life forms. But what can be said is that experience has a transcendent glow to it. And as you become aware of it, this transcendence is not one even an external source can define for you. It is not something that someone says. Someone can only say whatever truth they can, just as they could constantly give you all their truth, but you will see at some point you're like, what is this guy talking about? Because I have my own ideas. Do you see? That you having your own ideas is the significant area of study. And guess what? You thought you had to study books to get smarter. You thought you had to study all these things outside of it. You thought you had to take all those courses, those self-help books, all those things that you had to get to be somebody. Guess what? It's all internal. Once you become aware of what is being maintained in this life process, you are putting yourself in an existential scale of seeing what your experience is cosmically. Are you a human being who's just trying to be happy or sad? Or are you the most newest experience of this reality, which within you there are many worlds of conception and many simultaneous projections of how that conception is constantly creating? Do you think that when I create this echo does not echo? My voice goes to all life because the voice of life is coming into my ear. And so if I can hear my own voice, life can hear itself in all degrees. And ask and you shall receive, for in that reception you were all that you could be. You were the knowing of life without a need for terminology, ideology, or definitions that would hinder you when you could never be hindered. Remember, you are the being first, then whatever human ideology, judgment, guilt, whatever framework comes. Be aware of your being. And you know how you become aware of it? As meditation as suggested, silence, stillness, and observance of sense perception, and how sense perception has led to your frameworks of thinking who you are. It is this point where I'm realizing, gosh, I don't need to just put effort for my lifetime. I need to put an effort for all mankind to look in a way where they have not before. And every person feels like this when they have seen something that they feel they need to share and contribute to the human species. I'm never helping an individual human being, because if I do so, then we are lost in our worlds. I am helping the human experience by being aware of its experience, and you can help yourself. Because on some end, I feel like a man just speaking to myself. But in the hope that these words are heard by a you that is aware of the universe in a very profound way, it was never about the lettering. For beyond sameness and differentiation, existence knew what it was doing. And existential comfort is your awareness to gracefully not do a certain thing to be in a certain way, but to be aware that you are. And as you are, you will be in and within your clarity. Your clarity will no longer be an object of experience. It will be the knowing of the experiencer. And it is that point where you may choose to go into more an observance of the moment and live a more gentler, graceful life, or you can choose to, after hitting that platform of emptiness and existential clarity, very efficiently beginning to become an advanced communicator and communicating in ways that is a couple thousand years ahead of its time. You can receive this intuitively, and it will just be your action. So what that means is that person who trusted his intuition and something phenomenal happened, that sense of navigating of human experience is much more ahead of its time than our culture and society can acknowledge. Do not lose sight of your collective consciousness, of your collective flow. It is all here, present, here and now. Study here and now, and in your clarity, bring forth your greatest work. Much blessings.